Here is a riddle. What starts with W and ends in "ite saviour"? It's me, Henry Howard, coming at you live once again from the lands of the Yorta Yorta people. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I'm a doctor working in regional Australia, and this year I'm dedicating 50% of everything I earn to causes that I think are making the world a better place. The world's a bit of a messed up place. About 2/3 of the people on this planet live on less than $4,000 a year, and if you're one of the people that's been really lucky in life, like me, I don't think it's something that should necessarily keep you up at night, but I don't think it's something that you should ever forget, that kind of fact as well. So this is a website that I've created about this journey that I'm going on. I'm calling it the Workathon, and there's a diagram on this website detailing which different charities I've given to so far. And the obvious question is, well, how am I deciding which charities to give to? And I'm glad you asked. I'm relying on a bunch of different sources of information. I'm relying on expert opinion. I'm relying on grassroots knowledge, the opinions of people that are at the ground, on the ground, experiencing the issues. I'm thinking about trials-based evidence as well, where people go out and actually run trials, trialing out different global development projects and seeing what actually helps people. And then the fourth type of information I'm relying on is crowdsourced knowledge, so advice from whoever's watching this or whoever's kind of hearing about what I'm doing and sends me comments or suggestions on charities that I can give to, or what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, and I really encourage people to give me feedback. This is what I call the pyramid scheme. So I'm giving a lot of money to charities that are just doing really fantastic work, and I'm giving even more money to charities that are doing even more fantastic, really, really fantastic work. So this fortnight I've chosen 3 charities to give to, and they're the Community First Development, Lighthouse Foundation, and Evidence Action. So if we start with Evidence Action is one of these charities that's recommended by GiveWell, and GiveWell is this charity evaluator. What they do is they use that kind of trials-based evidence. So people going out and trying different ideas and just seeing what actually helps people. And they use that sort of evidence to build a list of charities that they think are just being really effective in the way they're using resources to help people. And one of the groups of organisations that they're really supportive of is Evidence Action is one of them, and they're organisations that tackle parasitic worm infections, which are not something that you think about necessarily a lot if you live in a country like Australia, but oh boy, I tell you, they're pretty common. It's something that a lot of people might think about, because about 2/3 of the world are infected with parasitic worms at any one time, and they cause a lot of havoc, and they can cause some really serious health conditions. The treatment for them is extremely cheap, and that's why these organisations are deemed to be so effective, because what they do is they mainly distribute these really cheap medications that are really effective among school kids, and they just kind of wipe out parasitic worms in entire communities at once. And there's good evidence that this works. So Evidence Action does this kind of work, but Evidence Action does other work as well, and one of their programs is Dispensers for Safe Water. What this one is where they go to like water sources that might not be necessarily clean water, places like wells, and a lot of people are still getting their water out of wells in the world, which is not necessarily something that should keep you up at night, but also not something to forget about ever. And they distribute these kind of dispensers of chlorine so that people can then use the chlorine to disinfect the water so they don't get diseases like cholera, which can be really devastating. And there's evidence that this kind of program is extremely effective as well, and I'd really encourage you to have a read. This is a great report on the safe water, so the chlorine dispensing program that Evidence Action runs, and they have a really good report on their program on deworming as well. So the second charity that I'm giving to this fortnight is Lighthouse Foundation, which is a really nice Australian organisation. They provide housing and support to young people, young Australians who are either homeless or really struggling at home. And they have a really great report detailing kind of all their work. They seem to have some really cool programs, not only their shelters, but also kind of a bunch of stuff that runs around it. They're also very open with their finances. They do spend 10% of their money just about on fundraising. And, fundraising is not something that I'm super keen on because, it's in an ideal world, charities wouldn't have to spend money on fundraising because people would go out and they would seek groups that were doing really fantastic work and they would give without being asked. And I know we don't live in an ideal world, but I would just really encourage everyone to try and find people out there that are doing good work, and don't wait for them to hold a charity gala, an expensive charity dinner for you to convince you to give. Just give without being asked. And I think if we did more of that, then not only would charities not have to spend as much money on fundraising, but also I think people's faith in charities are a bit damaged by the amount that is spent on fundraising, and I think we could restore a little bit of that faith if more of us gave without being asked. Now, Lighthouse Foundation also has this really cool thing they've done called the Social Return on Investment Analysis. This is a report that was prepared independently of the Lighthouse Foundation. It was prepared by Social Ventures Australia, which is a charity consultancy firm. And what they've done, and it seems kind of ridiculous, but they try and put a dollar value on the amount of good that this organisation has done in the world, in their operations from 2007 to 2011. They try and put a dollar amount, and the dollar amount they've come up with, I'll have to zoom in because my face is in the way, but the dollar amount they've come up with is $169.5 million against a $14.1 million kind of investment, or that's what they were running on between 2007 and 2011. Now, coming up with that number it's absolutely wild. It's fuzzy, the numbers, but I just really like the idea that they are trying at least to critically assess, how much good they are really doing. Like, are we really helping people out in the world, and getting an independent voice to kind of come in and assess whether you're doing that as well. If this number is true, a 12 to 1 kind of return on investment, 12-fold return on investment is, that is an absolute dream. Why would you not invest in that kind of thing? Whether that number's true or not, of course, is super up for debate, but I think there's an enormous opportunity through charity and through, supporting valuable organisations to make massive change. Community First Development then is this last organisation that I want to talk about. So I've given these guys $150 this fortnight. They're an organisation that tries to improve the lives of Indigenous Australians, and they do it in this way that seems very grassroots. They seem to really heavily involve the members of the communities that they're trying to help. It's consulting a lot, constantly getting feedback. They've got a really nice report that they've released that I would heavily recommend anyone interested reading. They also do some really interesting stuff on impact analysis, so actually trying to come up with numbers about how much good they're doing in the world. Again, of course, a super difficult thing to do, but I think just the attempt is kind of valuable and valiant as well. It's a little bit confusing, this report. I did spend a bit of time trying to read it. They talk about these dream indicators and project indicators, and they have all these numbers and tables. I don't really understand exactly what it all means. If you have a read and you think you kind of get it, then please let me know. I'm a bit confused by it all. The projects that they run seem really cool. Community First Development, they have this men's shelter, the Aboriginal Males Healing Centre, which is kind of trying to tackle family violence in a non-judgmental, sort of culturally appropriate way. They're involved in this child and family centre, Urampi in Yundamu, which seems really cool. They run this non-for-profit driving school, which just seems like a really cool program. In terms of their finances, that's in this report, they do spend $600,000 a year on fundraising against their $3 million that they raise from the public. We are not living in an ideal world. If we gave a little more without being asked, I think the world might be a little better. I would encourage everyone to do that. Look, that's what I've done this month. Heavily encourage anyone to give me feedback. I suppose the world is a bit of a messed up place, and you know, it can be a bit draining to think about it. I think you shouldn't lose sleep over it. We shouldn't let it get in the way of us living our lives, but I also think it's really important not ever to forget how lucky we are, which is a pretty dramatic way of ending the stream. Fucking wanker.